My name is Hannah Collins. I'm 37 years old, and I used to believe that family meant safety. Not perfection. Not constant agreement. Just safety. The kind where you could drop your guard without worrying who might pick up a weapon. I was wrong. My daughter, Ava, is 11. She has my stubbornness and her father's quiet focus. Numbers calm her. Science excites her. She sees patterns where most people see chaos. I've always told her that intelligence is a gift, but humility is grace. She's both. Or at least, she was before that Tuesday. My younger sister-in-law, Rebecca, married my husband's brother, Daniel, 6 years ago. From the outside, Rebecca was flawless. She brought lemon bars to every family dinner, remembered birthdays without Facebook reminders, and spoke in that soft, measured voice people trust instinctively. If you asked anyone in our extended family who the most put-together person was, they would say Rebecca without hesitation. But I've always been good at reading pauses. Rebecca smiled often, but her eyes measured. She complimented Ava's little achievements in a tone that made the word little sound intentional. When Ava won her elementary science fair 2 years ago, Rebecca clapped first. Loudest. Then she leaned over and said, "That's wonderful. Just don't let it go to your head." I brushed it off. Her son, Mason, is 12. Sweet boy. Sensitive. He struggles in school. That's not a crime. Kids bloom differently. I've never compared them. But Rebecca did. Constantly. She'd mention Mason's tutoring in front of Ava. She'd joke that some kids are book-smart but socially clueless. She'd say it lightly, laughing, but her gaze always landed on my daughter. Still, I told myself I was imagining it. Because family requires benefit of the doubt. Right. Last Tuesday, I had a late client meeting. My husband was traveling for work. I called Daniel and asked if Ava could stay at their place for 2 hours. It wasn't unusual. Ava had spent countless afternoons there. Rebecca always insisted she loved having her. When I arrived to pick Ava up, she was sitting at the kitchen island, backpack on her lap. She didn't run to hug me like she usually did. She didn't even smile. "She's just tired," Rebecca said quickly, wiping already clean counters. "Big day at school, I guess." Ava nodded, but she didn't look at me. In the car, I asked how her day went. "Fine." Just that. Fine. Her voice was flat. Too flat. At home, she walked straight to her bedroom. A few minutes later, she came back out and hovered near the hallway bathroom. When she lifted her arms to tie her hair up, her shirt shifted. That's when I saw it. A dark, blooming bruise along her left side. Not small. Not accidental looking. It spread across her ribs like spilled ink. My heart didn't race. It stopped. "Ava," I said carefully. "What happened?" She froze. There's a moment when a child decides whether it's safe to tell the truth. I watched that calculation happen behind her eyes. I hated that she had to calculate at all. I fell, she whispered. "Where?" She swallowed. "At Aunt Rebecca's." The lie was thin. Fragile. I stepped closer. "Sweetheart. Look at me." Her lip trembled. She tried to hold it together. She always tries to be brave. Then she broke. Tears came fast, silent at first, then shaking. I didn't mean to make anyone mad. The words didn't make sense. Who was mad? I asked, though my stomach already knew. She wiped her face with both hands. "I got my math benchmark back today. I got a 97. I blinked. "That's amazing." I showed Mason because he was upset about his test. Her voice cracked. "I thought maybe we could study together next time." I could see it unfolding. "Rebecca saw it," Ava continued. "She said I shouldn't wave my grades around in her house. I said I wasn't waving it. I was happy." My hands were shaking now, but I kept them steady at my sides. What happened next? She took me into the hallway. She said I was embarrassing Mason. That I needed to learn some humility. Ava's breathing hitched. Then she hit me. The room felt too small. "How?" I asked. "Hard," she whispered. "Right here." She pressed her palm against the bruise. "Did Mason see?" She shook her head. "He was in the living room." Has she ever? I stopped myself. But Ava didn't. She grabbed my arm once before, when I corrected Mason on a spelling word. The world tilted. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, hating the question as soon as it left my mouth. I didn't want to cause problems, she said. You always say family matters. I did say that. And now those words tasted like betrayal. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I walked to the kitchen, grabbed my keys, and said calmly, "Put your shoes on." "Are we going back there?" she asked, fear flashing. "No," I said. "We're going somewhere else." And as we drove toward urgent care, I realized something terrifying. This wasn't just about a bruise. This was about jealousy. And jealousy, inside someone who hides it well, can become something far more dangerous than anger. This was the moment everything shifted. And I had no idea how much darker it was about to get. The urgent care clinic smelled like antiseptic and artificial lavender. Too clean. Too calm. I hated that the world outside our car window kept moving as if nothing had changed. Inside that small exam room everything had. The nurse asked Ava what happened. I stayed quiet. I needed to hear her say it without me guiding the story. Her voice shook, but she didn't look at me. She looked at the wall behind the nurse and told the truth. My aunt hit me. The words landed softly, but they detonated inside my chest. The doctor examined the bruise carefully. His expression shifted from clinical neutrality to something heavier. "This isn't consistent with a fall," he said gently. I already knew that. He documented everything. Measurements. Color. Location. He asked Ava if she felt safe at home. She said yes. He asked if she felt safe at her aunt's house. She hesitated. Then she whispered, "No." That single word set everything in motion. Because in our state, medical professionals are mandatory reporters. By the time we left, a report had already been filed with Child Protective Services. I sat in the parking lot gripping the steering wheel long after Ava buckled her seatbelt. My phone buzzed. Daniel. I declined the call. It buzzed again. Then Rebecca. Decline. Then Daniel again. I turned the phone face down. That night, Ava slept in my bed. She curled against me the way she hadn't since she was 7. Around 2 a.m., she stirred and whispered something into the dark. "Mom, I'm here." She said if I kept showing off, no one would want me around. My throat closed. "You are wanted," I said. "Always." In the morning, I called an attorney. Her name was Laura Bennett. She specialized in child injury cases and domestic assault involving relatives. Her voice was direct. No nonsense. "Did the clinic file a report?" she asked. "Yes." "Good. That creates documentation. Now we move fast." Fast. I didn't feel fast. I felt like I was walking through water. Daniel showed up at my house that evening without warning. He looked pale. Agitated. "Hannah, what is going on?" he demanded as soon as I opened the door. "CPS called us. They said there's an allegation." "It's not an allegation," I said evenly. "It's a report." He stepped inside. "Rebecca would never hit a child. She hit mine." He ran a hand through his hair. "Ava must have misunderstood. Maybe Rebecca grabbed her too hard or there's a bruise the size of my hand on her ribs." He stopped talking. "That doesn't just happen," I continued. "And Ava described it clearly." "She's 11, he said weakly. "Kids exaggerate." I felt something inside me harden. "She didn't want to tell me," I said quietly. "She tried to protect your wife." Daniel sat down heavily in a chair. "Rebecca said Ava was being competitive," he muttered. "That she made Mason feel small." "She got a 97, I replied. "Should she apologize for that?" He didn't answer. Instead, he asked the question I'd been expecting. "Are you pressing charges?" I met his eyes. "Yes." He looked stunned. "Hannah, this will destroy our family." "No," I said calmly. "Rebecca did that." 3 days later, CPS came to interview Ava at home. I waited in the kitchen while the caseworker spoke with her privately in the living room. I could hear murmurs. Then silence. Then Ava's voice cracking. When the caseworker emerged, her face was composed but firm. Her statement is consistent, she said. And detailed. She paused. There's something else. My stomach dropped. Ava indicated this wasn't the first time your sister-in-law has been aggressive. The air left my lungs. What does that mean? She described prior incidents. Grabbing. Verbal intimidation. One instance where Rebecca squeezed her arm hard enough to leave marks. I felt physically ill. Why hadn't I seen it? That evening, Daniel called again. This time, I answered. CPS is coming to our house tomorrow, he said flatly. They should, I replied. He was quiet for a long time. Rebecca says Ava is lying because she's jealous of Mason. The irony was almost laughable. My daughter isn't jealous, I said. She's scared. Another silence. Then he said something that made my skin crawl. Rebecca said she was just teaching her humility. Teaching. Humility. With her hand. I ended the call. Later that night, as I tucked Ava in, she held my wrist tightly. Are they mad at me? She asked. Who? Aunt Rebecca. Uncle Daniel. They're adults, I said gently. If they're mad, that's their responsibility. Not yours. She nodded, but she didn't look convinced. Just before she drifted off, she whispered something that shattered whatever illusion I had left. Mom. This wasn't the worst time. My heart pounded. What do you mean? She stared at the ceiling. Last month, when Mason got a C in science, she told me I should stop answering questions in front of him. She said if I kept making him look dumb, she'd make sure I didn't feel smart anymore. I sat frozen beside her bed. This wasn't a moment of anger. This was resentment. Carefully cultivated. And suddenly, this case wasn't just about one bruise. It was about a pattern. And patterns, when exposed, don't go quietly. I didn't sleep that night. Patterns. That word kept circling my mind like a warning siren. One bruise could be dismissed by people who needed to believe in their own comfort. But a pattern? A pattern demands accountability. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table with a yellow legal pad and began writing down every moment that had ever made me uncomfortable around Rebecca. The science fair comment. The spelling correction incident. The way she'd once said, not everyone needs to aim for Ivy League, some kids are happier being average. At the time, I thought she was speaking generally. Now I realized she had been speaking specifically. About my daughter. By noon, my phone rang. It was Laura. CPS has opened a formal investigation, she said. And there's something else. My stomach tightened. What? Another parent reached out. My pen froze over the paper. She heard about the report through a mutual friend, Laura continued. Her daughter used to attend Rebecca's weekend study group last year. I remembered that group. Rebecca had started hosting small tutoring sessions for neighborhood kids. She called it academic enrichment. What did she say? I asked quietly. She said her daughter came home crying once. There was a bruise on her forearm. The child said Rebecca grabbed her for being disruptive. The room went still. Did they report it? No. The mother said Rebecca convinced her it was an accident. Said the girl tripped. Of course she did. Rebecca was excellent at wrapping harm in calm explanations. Is the mother willing to give a statement? I asked. Yes. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. This wasn't jealousy flaring out of nowhere. This was control. That afternoon, CPS interviewed Mason at school. I didn't expect to hear anything immediately. But 2 days later, Daniel showed up again. He looked different this time. Less defensive. More shaken. They talked to Mason, he said as he stepped inside. He told them Rebecca gets angry. I didn't say anything. She doesn't hit him, Daniel added quickly. Then he faltered. At least. I don't think she does. Daniel, I said gently, has Mason ever flinched when she raises her voice? He swallowed. Yes. Does he apologize a lot? His silence was answer enough. He sat down at the table and pressed his hands against his face. I thought she was just strict, he whispered. I thought she was pushing him to do better. There's a difference between pushing and punishing, I said. He nodded slowly, like a man assembling pieces of a puzzle he didn't want to see completed. That evening, something unexpected happened. Rebecca's mother called me. I almost didn't answer. But I did. Her voice trembled. Hannah. I don't know what's happening, but Rebecca is unraveling. I said nothing. She's pacing. Crying. Then getting angry. She keeps saying Ava humiliated Mason. My jaw tightened. And she said something else. Her mother continued hesitantly. She said, maybe I shouldn't have hit her so hard. The words felt like ice water poured down my spine. Did you record that? I asked before I could stop myself. A pause. Yes. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I didn't mean to, she said quickly. I turned on my voice memo because she was scaring me. Can you send it to my lawyer? Another pause. Yes. After we hung up, I sat in complete silence. Then I called Laura. This changes everything, she said after listening to the clip. We're filing for a protective order immediately. Within 48 hours, the judge granted a temporary restraining order. Rebecca was legally barred from contacting Ava or coming near our home. When I told Ava, she didn't celebrate. She just exhaled. Like she had been holding her breath for weeks. Meanwhile, the whispers began. A cousin texted me. Is this really necessary? An aunt left a voicemail suggesting family counseling instead of police. One even implied I was overreacting. Overreacting. To a grown woman striking my child out of jealousy. I stopped answering. 3 days later, charges were officially filed. Felony child endangerment and misdemeanor assault. Rebecca was arrested at her home that afternoon. Daniel called me from the police station parking lot. She keeps saying she didn't mean it, he said hollowly. She says she just lost control. You don't lose control because a child scored higher than your son, I replied. There was a long silence. Then Daniel asked something that made my heart sink. Hannah, do you think she resents Ava because she reminds her of everything Mason struggles with? I chose my words carefully. I think Rebecca sees achievement as a threat. Another pause. Mason told CPS something else, Daniel whispered. He said Mom doesn't like it when other kids are smarter. The simplicity of that statement crushed me. Not other adults. Other kids. That night, as Ava worked on her homework at the dining table, I watched her carefully. She was still raising her hand slightly before answering my questions. Still asking, is this okay? When she showed me her work. She was 11. She should have been excited about her 97. Instead, she was measuring her own brightness. And that was the moment I understood something with terrifying clarity. Rebecca hadn't just tried to hurt my daughter physically. She had tried to dim her. And that was something I would never forgive. The trial date was set for 3 weeks later. I thought we had already seen the worst. I was wrong. Because proof was coming. And it would be undeniable. The call came on a Thursday afternoon while I was folding laundry. It was the district attorney. Her tone was different from before. Sharper, focused. Mrs. Collins, we've obtained something significant. My pulse quickened. What kind of significant? Video. I stopped moving. Daniel gave us access to their home security system. He forgot the hallway camera automatically backs up to a cloud account he still controls. For a moment, the room felt weightless. Does it show? I couldn't finish. It shows enough. That phrase haunted me for hours. Enough. I didn't ask to see it right away. I wasn't sure I could handle it. But 2 days later, sitting in Laura's office, I watched. The footage was slightly grainy. Timestamp in the corner. Late afternoon. Ava stood near the hallway wall, backpack hanging from one shoulder. Mason walked past her toward the living room. Then Rebecca entered the frame. She looked calm. Too calm. She said something first, audio faint but audible when enhanced. You think you're better than him? Ava shook her head quickly. Rebecca stepped closer, blocking the exit path. You don't parade grades around in my house. Ava's shoulders hunched. Even without seeing the actual impact, because the camera angle shifted slightly, you could see Rebecca's arm draw back. You could see the force in her posture. You could see Ava recoil. Then Rebecca leaned down and hissed something the microphone caught clearly. Maybe that'll teach you. The video ended. I realized I'd been holding my breath. Laura closed the laptop slowly. "She can't spin this," she said. I nodded, but my hands were trembling. The courtroom felt colder than the urgent care room had weeks earlier. Rebecca walked in wearing a soft blue blouse and pearl earrings. She looked like someone attending a brunch, not someone facing felony charges. She didn't look at me. She didn't look at Ava. The prosecution opened with facts. Medical documentation. CPS findings. Prior witness statements from the tutoring parent. Rebecca's attorney tried to frame it as a misunderstanding. A strict aunt disciplining a disrespectful child. Then the prosecutor said 6 words that shifted the entire atmosphere. "We have security footage." Rebecca stiffened. The screen lit up. The hallway appeared. The jury leaned forward. The room went silent except for the faint static of the recording. When Rebecca's voice echoed through the speakers, "You don't parade grades around in my house," a visible ripple moved through the jury box. By the time the clip ended, there was no confusion left. Rebecca's lawyer stood abruptly and objected to interpretation of intent. The judge overruled. And then Rebecca did something she shouldn't have. She stood up. "I was teaching her humility," she snapped. "Someone has to." Her attorney grabbed her sleeve, whispering urgently. But it was too late. Those words weren't remorse. They were justification. Next came testimony from the other mother. "Come. Steady." She described her daughter's bruise. Rebecca's explanation. The doubt she carried for 2 years. Then CPS presented Mason's interview summary. Daniel took the stand. I had never seen my brother-in-law look so fragile. He described Mason's anxiety. The flinching. The over-apologizing. The way his son once asked if it was okay to get a B. Then he said something that made my throat tighten. I thought she was motivating him. I didn't realize she was scaring him. The prosecutor handed him a small spiral notebook. "Do you recognize this?" Daniel nodded. "It's Mason's." He opened it. The first page read, "Rules so Mom doesn't get mad." He read them aloud. "Don't talk about grades. Don't answer questions unless asked. Don't make mistakes. Don't cry. Don't argue. Don't tell Dad." A collective breath left the courtroom. The child psychologist explained how children create behavioral survival lists in unstable emotional environments. "It indicates chronic fear," she said gently. "Not a one-time incident." When Ava's turn came, she walked to the stand holding my hand. She looked small in that chair. But her voice didn't waver. "She told me I was embarrassing Mason," Ava said. "I wasn't trying to. I just wanted to help." "Why didn't you tell your mother earlier?" the defense attorney asked. Ava swallowed. "Because Aunt Rebecca said I'd break the family apart if I did." The jury's expressions shifted. Rebecca stared straight ahead. No tears. No shame. Just irritation. The prosecution rested. And I felt something inside me settle. This was no longer about convincing anyone. The truth was visible. And Rebecca had revealed more about herself in one outburst than we ever could have planned. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. 4 of the longest hours of my life. When they returned, the 4-person stood. Guilty on all counts. Rebecca didn't cry. She didn't apologize. She looked offended. The judge sentenced her to 8 years in prison, with mandatory anger management and a permanent restriction from supervising minors. As she was led away, she finally looked at me. Not with regret. With blame. I didn't flinch. Because for the first time since that Tuesday, I knew something with certainty. She could never hurt my daughter again. But the story wasn't finished. Because the sentencing was only the legal ending. The emotional one was still unfolding. The day Rebecca was led out of the courtroom, Ava didn't run into my arms. She just exhaled slowly, like a weight she didn't know she'd been carrying had finally lifted. Her small hand slipped into mine, and I squeezed it gently. That was enough for both of us. No triumphant celebration. No declarations of victory. Just quiet relief. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table watching her color in her sketchbook. The pencil hovered in her hand over a blank page. For a moment, I worried she might have lost her spark entirely. But then she began to draw again, carefully, softly, and a tiny smile crept onto her face. It wasn't a full smile, not yet. But it was a start. Daniel reached out to me that night, this time with humility. He wanted to talk, really talk. I let him in, but only after Ava was safely upstairs in her room. His voice was quiet, a little broken. "Hannah, I don't know how I missed it," he said. "I should have protected Mason, Ava, both of them. I should have listened to you sooner." "I know," I said. "But it's done now. What matters is keeping them safe moving forward." He nodded, swallowing hard. "I've already started Mason in therapy. He needs help processing everything." "That's good," I replied. "He also needs to understand that sometimes adults fail, even the ones he trusts most. And that it's not his fault." Daniel looked at me with gratitude. Maybe even shame. "I believe you now. About Ava. About everything." That acknowledgement was heavy, but it mattered. For the first time, someone on the other side was willing to face reality. Ava remained cautious. She didn't hug me, didn't say thank you 1,000 times. But every now and then, she would look up from her drawings and meet my eyes with quiet trust. That trust had been shaken, and it would take time to rebuild, but it was a start. Over the next week, we started reclaiming our routines. Library visits resumed, homework happened at the kitchen table instead of in whispered secrecy, and bedtime stories returned to being moments of laughter rather than hushed warnings. Yet, every so often, I would catch myself glancing at the hallway, scanning the walls, reminding myself that protection now meant vigilance. We also began documenting everything. Photos of Ava's bruises, medical notes, text messages from Daniel, and recordings of conversations when necessary. Laura encouraged it. She said it built a clear timeline, a paper trail that would leave no room for manipulation. And manipulation was Rebecca's weapon. She thrived on twisting perception, convincing anyone she could that she was the victim. The local school also got involved. Teachers were aware of the incidents and kept a closer eye on both Ava and Mason. Their principal called, expressing support and offering counseling services. This wasn't just about punishment anymore. It was about making sure children could feel safe in the environments they should have been safe in all along. At home, Ava slowly started speaking more freely about her feelings. Not directly about Rebecca, but about her own confidence, the science fair, her love for math. I listened without judgment, without correction, letting her words float into the air as if by acknowledging them we could reclaim part of the life that Rebecca had tried to dim. Even Daniel began showing signs of awareness. He would sit with Mason quietly after school, helping him with his homework without criticism, without comparing him to Ava. Slowly, Mason started to relax. His shoulders uncurled, and a hint of his natural curiosity returned. It was subtle, but it was progress. One evening, as I watched Ava reading aloud from her science textbook, she paused and said softly, "Mom, I think I can help Mason understand this part." I smiled, the warmth in my chest spreading. "You can teach him. But remember, learning is about helping, not competing." She nodded, her eyes bright. "I know." That moment crystallized everything. Despite the trauma, despite the betrayal, Ava was resilient. And that resilience was more valuable than any punishment could be. It was the thing Rebecca could never take away. Later that week, Laura called with an update from the DA's office. They're preparing for sentencing. Witnesses are coming forward. Medical professionals, neighbors, parents from the tutoring group. The pattern is clear now. This case will leave a permanent mark. I hung up the phone, feeling the weight of anticipation. Ava peeked over my shoulder. "Mom, is it really over?" "It's just beginning," I said. "But this time we're ready." Because we had to be. Ready for justice. Ready for healing. Ready for a life where my daughter could thrive without fear, without looking over her shoulder, without doubting that doing well in school was a thing worth celebrating. And for the first time since that terrible Tuesday, I allowed myself a quiet moment of hope. It wasn't relief yet. Not entirely. But it was enough to breathe. The fight wasn't over. But it had finally shifted in our favor. And that shift was everything. The morning of the final hearing arrived with a chill that seemed to seep into my bones. Ava stayed home that day, coloring quietly at the kitchen table, while Daniel and I made our way to the courthouse. The building loomed large, sterile walls and polished floors reflecting the gravity of what was about to happen. Every step echoed like a reminder of everything we'd endured. Rebecca walked into the courtroom with her usual composed smile, dressed neatly, her hair immaculate. If I didn't know better, I might have thought she was simply attending a school board meeting. But I did know better. She had spent years perfecting the illusion of control and charm. Today, it wouldn't protect her. The prosecution began calmly, presenting evidence in clear, undeniable fashion. The medical documentation, the CPS reports, the statements from the other parent whose child had been hurt under Rebecca's supervision, Mason's diary, and the notebook detailing the rules he had created to survive her temper. Each piece built upon the last, forming a chain that left no gaps for excuses. Then came the most critical evidence. The hallway video. The grainy footage of Rebecca cornering Ava played on the large screen. Every subtle movement, every tense gesture, every harsh word spoken under her breath was captured. Even without seeing the strike, her intent was clear. The jury leaned forward, silent, absorbing every second. My stomach knotted as my chest tightened. But more than fear, I felt vindication. The truth could no longer be hidden. Rebecca's lawyer tried to cast doubt, claiming the video didn't show the full context. But when the clip ended, Rebecca herself lost control. She jumped to her feet, insisting, "I was teaching her humility. That's all." Her words were sharp, defensive, and completely self-serving. The judge's eyes narrowed, the courtroom hanging on the edge of every word. Then Daniel took the stand. I had never seen him look so hollow, so stripped of the illusions he had held. He spoke of Mason's fear, the flinching, the constant apologies for things that weren't his fault. And then he read from Mason's notebook, each line echoing through the room, a child's desperate attempt to survive an environment of fear. Finally, it was Ava's turn. She walked in holding my hand, small, quiet, but resolute. On the witness stand, she described the events calmly, without exaggeration, without pleading for sympathy. She told the jury exactly what happened, what she felt, and why she had tried to protect both Mason and herself by staying silent for so long. When she spoke, you could see the jurors absorbing the weight of every word. Their expressions shifted from curiosity to horror to quiet determination. The closing arguments were succinct but powerful. The prosecutor spoke not with anger, but with clarity. This was not a case of misunderstanding. It was a pattern. Consistent, intentional, harmful behavior disguised by charm. Every adult in that room could see it, and the jury could decide if they would let it continue unchecked. The jury deliberated for just over 3 hours. 3 hours that felt like an eternity. When they returned, the foreperson stood and announced the verdict. Guilty on all counts. A wave of relief, almost disbelief, swept through me. Rebecca didn't cry. She didn't plead. She simply stared ahead, as if the courtroom had betrayed her instead of exposing the truth. The judge handed down the sentence. 10 years in prison, with no parole for 6, mandatory anger management, and a lifetime restriction from being around minors. The words echoed in the courtroom, heavy with finality. Rebecca was led away in handcuffs, still maintaining the illusion that she had done nothing wrong. But I didn't care. My daughter was safe. That was all that mattered. Outside the courthouse, the air felt lighter. Ava ran up to me, her small arms wrapping around my waist, a quiet laugh escaping her lips. "Mom," she said softly, "it's over." "Yes," I whispered back, holding her close. "It's over." Daniel approached us later, his expression filled with remorse and gratitude. He hugged Ava and apologized not just for what Rebecca had done, but for his own blindness, his delay in believing the truth. He promised to support both children fully, to be the parent they needed, not the one who had been seduced by appearances. Back at home, life slowly returned to a new normal. Ava no longer flinched at raised voices, and her laughter at dinner felt genuine again. Mason, too, began to relax, exploring his interests without fear of reprimand. I watched them together, realizing that safety and love were finally restored in our home. The trauma didn't vanish overnight, but the healing had begun. That night, as I tucked Ava into bed, she looked up at me and smiled, a full, unguarded smile. "Mom," she whispered, "can we go to the library tomorrow?" "Yes," I said. "We can." And in that moment, I understood the true meaning of justice. Not revenge, not punishment alone, but the restoration of peace and the reclamation of a life that had been threatened. The fear was gone. The shadow Rebecca cast over our family had been lifted. And for the first time in months, I could breathe again, knowing my daughter could grow, thrive, and dream without fear. The courtroom had delivered its verdict. But the real victory was here in our home, in the quiet moments, in the laughter and learning that no one, not even someone so cunning, could take away. For Ava, for Mason, for me, life could finally move forward. And that was more than enough.